missing information or dependencies that your recipient needs to be aware of. In this video, we'll go over how to use if-then statements to improve communication flow in your messages. So what are some advantages of if-then statements? The first is that they reduce the amount of follow-up emails that you actually have to write. The second is that they clarify expectations and assumptions so that there's absolutely no confusion by your recipients. And then finally, they hold people accountable for getting back to you by a certain time or date. And in the next few slides, we'll talk about 4 different tips that help you accomplish all of that. So tip number 1 is to use if-then for clarity on next steps. And the best way to explain that is to give you a couple of examples. So the first example is me sending an email to Michael saying, Michael, we're leaving today at 5:30 p.m. If you cannot be here at that time, then please meet us directly at the restaurant by 6 p.m. So I'm reducing the amount of back and forth email, and I'm giving Michael an option that if he can't make it by 5:30 p.m. to meet us directly at the restaurant. Another example is me sending an email to Jennifer saying, Jennifer, you should have all the information you need. If you have any other questions, then please call the support desk at 800-555-2321. The second tip is to use if-then to explain assumptions and set expectations. And here are a couple of examples. The first example is, Kelly, your note wasn't very clear to me. If you meant A, then I suggest we do B. Otherwise, if you meant X, then I suggest we do Y. And I'm just filling in the blanks on A and B and X and Y here in terms of what I'm trying to explain there. And if you notice, I've got a couple of if-then statements. The first one here and then the second one there, so that I set expectations and assumptions with what Kelly was trying to get at in her note. A second example is, Daniel, please lead the meeting today while I'm out. If you don't have access to it, then please create a new meeting invite and send it to the team. The third tip is to use if-then for accountability by your team members. And this is actually my favorite tip because it holds people accountable for their actions. So one example is, Jason, please let me know whether you want to make any more changes to the document. If I don't hear back by Friday, Jan 15th at noon Central Time, then I'll assume you're good and I will send it to the client at that time. So again, what I did here was I held Jason accountable to replying back to my email, and that if he doesn't, then the repercussions are clearly stated in the message. Another example is Sarah. Another friendly reminder to get back to me with your approval on the note below. If you don't respond by Monday, June 9th at 9 a.m. Eastern, then this will be automatically rejected by the system. So I'm also explaining what the repercussions are if Sarah does not follow up on the action. And then the final and fourth tip is to use if-then to have your team members remind you of something later on. So one example is, Scott, I'll ask around and get back to you. If you don't hear back from me by Friday, then please send me a quick reminder early next week so I can follow up on that for you. A second example is, Michelle, I'm on the road. If I don't respond back to you by later tonight, then please remind me again tomorrow morning. So I'm basically using my team members as a calendar invite to remind me about something that I have to do for them later on. All right, so let's wrap up with a quick summary. Use if-then statements to clarify next steps, to explain assumptions and set expectations, to hold team members accountable, and finally to ask team members to remind you of actions later on. And by doing so, you will reduce the amount of email that you get from your team, and you will improve your communication flow in your messages. That's it. Thank you so much for watching, and on to the next video. So email is a really bad medium for brainstorming and long discussions. And this is particularly true when a lot of people are copied on an email. In this short video, we'll go over how to present options instead of asking open-ended questions so that you control the conversation a little bit more. So the first tip is, don't end an email with thoughts. And that's because phrases like thoughts or what do you all think about this invite people to share their never-ending opinions. And you'll get a flood of emails from them with very little control over the conversation. So instead, limit their options by stating something like, do you think we should do A, B, or C? And this guides them on a specific answer and avoids any off-tangent discussions. And now if a longer conversation is needed, then make sure you schedule a meeting instead. But in most cases, you can actually avoid a long conversation when you limit the options, such as the example there, where you ask people if you think we should do A, B, or C. So instead of responses such as, oh, I think we should do this or we should do that, they're going to get back to you with, oh, I think we should do A, or someone else is going to say, I think we should do C. The second tip is don't ask, when do you think we should meet? So when scheduling a meeting, asking your team members questions such as, when do you think we should meet, will also get you an avalanche of responses. Someone might say, oh, I think we should meet next week. Someone might say, I'm free Tuesday. Others might say, oh, Wednesday afternoon works for me. And it's just a never-ending rabbit hole. A better way is to state something like, team, we can meet for 30 minutes on one of these days. 1. Friday, June 3rd at 10 a.m. US Eastern Time. 2. Tuesday, June 7th at 1 p.m. US Eastern Time. And 3. Thursday, June 9th at 7 a.m. US Eastern Time. Which option works best for you? Again, you're limiting options here where people are going to respond with either 1 or 3, or someone might say 2 is best for me. And that way you're going to reduce a lot of the headaches on your end. So quick summary. Minimize the number of emails you get by presenting options instead of asking open-ended questions. Then if a longer conversation is warranted, schedule a meeting instead to have a more effective discussion. Thanks for watching, and on to the next video. So a big pet peeve for everyone is when someone doesn't read their own email messages to catch any errors before they hit send. And in this short video, we'll go over how and why you should read your email messages once for a content check before you send them. So let's start with why reread your emails. That's because there's always a chance that you'll have a content mistake in your message. And note, what I mean here is not spelling or grammar mistakes. I really think spelling or grammar mistakes can be forgiven even though they are an annoyance. However, content mistakes are a little bit different. Content mistakes include things such as replying to the wrong question, stating the facts incorrectly, or adding in the wrong date. And those type of mistakes misrepresent what you want to say and usually have the worst consequences. So if I say yes when I mean no, or I state June 9th when I meant July 9th, then the consequences there are different than when I misspell a specific word. And 95% of those mistakes can be easily avoided if you just reread your emails at least once before you send them. And people usually state that they're way too busy to reread an email. And my packaged answer is that if you don't have the time to read your emails again, then when will you have the time to write them again? And that's because if you do have a content mistake in one of your emails, you're going to spend a lot more time clarifying and updating your recipients on correcting that mistake. So it's definitely a lot faster to just reread your email than having to worry about retyping it again. And in the next couple of slides, we'll talk about a couple of tips that will help you with that. So the first tip is to reread your entire email. So reread your entire email before you click on the send button. Not a portion of it or just the actions within it, but all of it. And that's because the curse of knowledge will rear its ugly head again if you just glance over specific sections. Now, the curse of knowledge was a concept we talked about in an earlier video, and what I mean by that is your message might be clear in your own mind, but unless you put yourself in your reader's shoes and reread the whole email from top to bottom, you won't catch those content mistakes. And some of the things you want to double check include names, acronyms, time zones, and any other important dates. The second tip is to reread questions and answers. So if you're replying back to questions, reread the questions and your answers, not just the answers, to help ensure that your responses make sense before you reply. And a good practice is to add context in your answers for validation, particularly with important information. So for example, instead of replying back with just an okay, type the following instead. Okay, I'm confirmed to meet you on Thursday at 10 a.m. October 20th. And this is not only reassuring, but it gives the other party an extra chance to correct something if they made the content error. So in this specific example, if someone sends me an email saying, hey, let's meet on Thursday at 10 a.m. October 20th, and I reply back and I say, okay, I'm confirmed to meet you on Thursday at 10 a.m. October 20th. If they made an initial mistake and said, oh, it's not really October, it's November 20th, it'll give them that sort of extra chance to correct that. And moreover, adding context to your answers is a good habit because if there are multiple questions in that email and you just reply with an okay, you might be inadvertently agreeing to everything in that message. Alright, let's wrap up with a quick summary. Reread your entire email for a content check before you hit send, and check things like names, time zones, and any other important information. And then if you're replying back to questions, make sure you reread both the questions and the answers. Thanks so much for watching, and on to the next video.